Evening, I'm Erin Burnett, and out front tonight we begin with that breaking news. Trump's trade war tanking markets tonight. The Dow down almost 700 points. That brings the two-day loss for the Dow to 1,200 points. Markets now lower than when Trump was sworn in. And all of this as the president is about to head to the Capitol to speak to his biggest audience since taking office, obviously the joint session, but also around the world. Trump expected to talk about a lot of things, including his war against America's trading partners, Canada and Mexico, also on that list, the tariffs on China that has caused panic around the world and at home and in those markets. And at the White House, we're told they've been fielding calls all day long from angry Republicans, many of them from agricultural states, who are worried about Trump's social media posts that they should, quote, have fun with the tariffs. And then there's the counterstrikes in this war. China tonight putting a 15% tariff on a number of American farm products. A number of Canadian provinces are now banning U.S. products altogether, including American alcohol. Ontario came out and ripped up a $100 million contract with Starlink. Of course, that's Elon Musk's Starlink. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is not holding back.
He has said repeatedly that what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us. First of all, that's never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state.
I mean, I can't believe we're living in a world where we're actually talking about that seriously, as he was, because Trump keeps bringing it up. The backlash has been fast and furious to the tariffs, so much so that suddenly the White House is signaling all of a sudden, right? No way, we're not going to stop. We're doing it. And then here they are. They come in, and then less than 24 hours later, we hear this on Fox News.
It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way. And we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow.
What? I mean, is this a weird situation to be in, where it is possible that the only thing worse than starting a full-on trade war is backing off so fast that nobody thinks your word means anything at all? It also...
Retail giants Target and Best Buy sounding the alarm on tariffs, warning of potential price hikes for consumers. Meanwhile, the auto industry is on edge, bracing for the impact of new trade policies. Jeff Flock joins us from a dealership in Pennsylvania. Hey, Jeff, good to see you. How will car prices be affected by these new tariffs?
I don't think they're coming down, Lydia, as a result of the tariffs. That's one thing for sure. Take this Ram. This is a heavy-duty Ram truck built in Mexico. $91,000 is what the sticker is right now. You put the tariff on there, $120,000. Can you sell it, David Keller?
No, that Ram will not sell for that amount. Yeah.
You're worried.
Yeah, I'm very concerned because...
Why?
It's not every car we sell. You know, it's Ram, Compass.
I was going to say, we can put up some of the vehicles that are made now in Mexico or Canada. They include your Compass. They include the Chevy Blazer, the Mustang Mach-E.
Yeah, but you have to understand, for a dealer, so I'm concerned about the dealers, because every piece of volume we lose, it creates a depth. We run on small margins, and the profit margin is small. So we lose a car to the tariffs, and it really is going to impact our dealerships. And the dealerships are the guys in the community, the guys that are working. Yeah. We impact our dealers in that fashion. It's a bad thing.
Barclays just put out, Lydia, a note to investors. And I think it says, I quote it in some way, without any adjustment on the part of the manufacturers, Barclays estimates that it could wipe out all of the profits from the big three automakers.
Yeah, well, that's not good either, right? I mean, because when they wipe out the profits, they're going to the research and development will dwindle.
When they come in, the tariffs are paid by the person who imported them, which in this case is the company, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the company's going to pay them, and that has to get passed on to somebody, right? I mean, so they can eat some of it, but once they eat some of it, their profits are going to dwindle. We're going to have a higher price car. Our profits are going to dwindle, and this.
You
can't
just
be
got told. That's the final point. You just got told by one of the executives at Stellantis that if the vehicles are out the door of the factory now, they are tariff free.
By midnight last night, they are tariff free.
So theoretically, you are going to have a couple of weeks of supply here. We got a little bit of room.
Yeah, a couple of weeks of supply, but that's not enough. We can't withstand that.
Okay. Well, you heard it right from the horse's mouth there, David Kelleher's mouth. David Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram here in the Philadelphia suburbs. Guys, back to you.
Jeff Locke, thank you very much for that live report.
Thanks, Lydia.
Trudeau making a personal and direct appeal to President Trump. Here's a big chunk of what he said today.
We stepped up. We engaged closely and constructively with the president and his administration. We did everything we promised. We stuck to our word. And we did it because we believe in working together to protect our citizens. Now I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. We signed a historic deal that has created record jobs and growth in both of our countries. We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the US have done together for decades, for generations. And now we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Really interesting that he said that. Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans and national affairs correspondent for The Nation, John Nichols. I was surprised that he went so directly and so personally at Donald Trump.
Well, I'll tell you, these tariffs are very personal to Canada. I mean, they really are, and they're big, and they had been paused. I think that they had really tried to assuage Donald Trump's concerns about fentanyl. They have a border czar now on a drug czar. They put all this money at the border. For
Not
the
very much fentanyl comes in from Canada.
For the 48 pounds of fentanyl that came in last year, and Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary today, also said this is a drug war. The trade war hasn't even started yet. This is simply a drug war to keep Americans from dying, which, again, you've got Canada saying, wait, we are not a big drug problem here in this country. And in fact, you need us to be your ally against, aggressive trade maneuvers from people like China, who really are competitors.
What does he have against Canada? Have we figured that out? Why he's
don't know. I really
so
don't know.
hell-bent on punishing them. He calls this a punishment.
And that's what's so perplexing from the Canadian side of things, right? Because they feel like they've been an ally in so many different ways to the United States. And again, the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, this amazing North American bloc, Donald Trump wrote the rules for automobile trade for these three countries just half a dozen years ago, and now is scrapping those and saying, I'm going to punish you over drugs. That's not what these countries signed up for.
John, talk to me a little bit about what this is going to mean, because when you're talking about an automobile, like Christine just mentioned, it goes across borders multiple times. So you're adding a 25% tariff multiple times on a single automobile.
Well, Christine just mentioned trade agreements. And, one of the complexities of trade agreements, of course, is that we now have integrated manufacturing, i.e. pieces move from country to country. And so the idea that you can simply, kind of shut that down and be in one place or another without recognizing that relationship is madness. It doesn't work in a modern age. And I think this re-emphasizes one of the challenges with Donald Trump. As the prime minister was saying, he's a smart guy, but he's a smart guy in certain areas of business. I don't think he and a lot of the people around him really understand trade policy. It's not supposed to be mixed up with drug policy. It's not supposed to be mixed up with other policies. It's supposed to be focused on how you use tariffs very carefully to shore up some aspects of business in your country, to open up markets in other countries. This is very complex stuff that, when it's done right, can actually work. Tariffs can be to the good, but it doesn't work when you have it so mangled in with so many other issues, and with what was just mentioned, seemingly an antipathy toward a country that's actually trying to work with you.
I do want to get into the pro-tariff argument here, because the White House is trying to make a pro-tariff argument. So if you're going to read this charitably, if you're going to, see the upside in this, what is it?
And I've spent weeks trying to really understand what is the worldview here that is driving these tariffs, because he's right. Targeted tariffs can be successful if very, very, surgical. This is not surgery what's happening here. This is a machete that's happening. But what they think is if you put these tariffs on, you're going to bring in all of this revenue. Now, that revenue is not coming from foreign countries. It's not. It's coming from the importers. So that's one of these things where their premise is off from what is conventional wisdom and is what is economic policy. They think that maybe it could spur more factories to come back to the United States, because if it's cheaper to make it here, then importers will buy that product here. But to be honest, it's cheaper to make certain things overseas. It just really is. If you move the manufacturing here, it will be more expensive. And in terms of the drug policy, again, that seems to be a punitive trade war tactic. That's not actually meant to grow the economy. I'm not sure how that fits in. I would agree with your other guests that just doesn't. Those things are separate.
John, when we're talking about farming, there's a lot of agriculture that's going to be affected here too. We can put some of the stuff up on the screen: tomatoes, berries, avocados. Not so easy to grow an avocado in Idaho. Not a place where avocados are going to thrive. But people have made points that it would be better for us to grow more of our own food here in this country, rely on our own food chain. If you are a farmer and you are anticipating these tariffs, how do you do that? How do you sustain your business?
I think a lot of them are scared. And I think a lot of them are very, very concerned. When tariffs were done some years back, they hit farmers hard. Now, the U.S. government stepped in to try and shore them up, and so that made it easier. But I think that for farmers, one of the great challenges is always certainty. It's true in most business. And farmers want to have a certainty that if they go into a certain product and frankly, buy a lot of seed or invest in a major way, that they're going to be able to produce it over time. What makes certainty is markets, right? If markets are available and you know that you're going to have ongoing relationships, then that works out well. When markets begin to be closed up and when you're under pressure not to produce certain things, maybe to produce other things.
Coming from a place now that we're in a very dark place in America, where we have a bully and a thug who is the President of the United States.
When Richard Gere speaks, the world listens. But nobody expected him to deliver a spiritual smackdown straight at Donald Trump. With 2 words, bully and thug, Hollywood's nicest guy just reignited the most random celebrity feud of 2025. Forget inner peace. This is inner beef.
It's about the tragedy that we're all experiencing in the U.S. I mean, the worst of it was a week ago when he decided to completely dismantle and destroy USAID, which is the wing of the U.S. government that was started around the time of Ronald Reagan, I believe.
If there was ever a celebrity feud nobody could have seen coming, it's Richard Gere versus Donald Trump, the spiritual monk versus the human Twitter storm. Richard Gere is the last guy you'd expect to be throwing verbal punches in 2025. This is the man who practically radiates incense and peaceful energy, a walking meditation app wrapped in cashmere scarves.
Well, I mean, our president has pushed it to the limit. It can't go any further than this. I mean, he came out of reality show television. He's like a game show person. There's no truth to it. There's no center to it.
For decades, Gere's brand has been all about quiet humanitarian work, Tibetan Buddhism, and giving acceptance speeches that usually involve phrases like, "Love and compassion will heal the world." The man could deliver a lecture on kindness while balancing a lotus flower on his head, and you'd believe every word.
The number of hate crimes in the U.S. went up enormously as soon as Donald Trump started running for president.
On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, the guy whose entire personality is built on never turning down a public feud. Reality TV villain? Check. Billionaire with a Twitter addiction? Double check. Former president who once got into a war of words with Gere? Absolutely. Trump's playbook is simple. If you breathe wrong in his direction, you're getting a 200-word social media rant complete with random capital letters and a sprinkle of sad for flavor.
shock. My wife is in shock. We're all in shock. It was, the people spoke and they elected this president. And that's a fact. But I don't even think the people who elected him really believed that he was going to do what he said he was going to do.
What makes this feud so delicious is how absurdly mismatched it is. Gere is the type to throw shade with a carefully crafted metaphor about the impermanence of the ego, while Trump would probably just call him balding Buddha and move on. It's like watching a poetry-reading pacifist accidentally stumble into a WWE ring and suddenly realize he's about to fight The Rock.
I hate to say it, but these clowns who are around our president are extremely immature, narcissistic people. So that kind of power and narcissism is deadly.
But here's the real kicker. Nobody even knew there was beef between these two. It's not like there's a long history of simmering tension. Richard Gere wasn't out here roasting Trump on late-night shows or subtweeting him from a burner account. This whole thing came out of absolutely nowhere, like the universe itself just decided we needed a random celebrity feud to spice up 2025. 1 minute, Gere was gracefully accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award, probably preparing to thank his spiritual guides and the Dalai Lama. The next minute, he's calling the former president of the United States a bully and a thug in front of a room full of Hollywood royalty. It was the kind of moment that made everyone do a collective spit take. Even the people clapping were probably looking around like, wait, did Richard Gere just pop off? And the funniest part? You just know Trump was probably watching from one of his golden hotel suites, mid-Diet Coke sip, absolutely ready to fire off a comeback before the credits even rolled.
Fortunately, we have leaders that stimulate fear, and that fear causes us to do really terrible things. I think that's part of what we're talking about in the film here. The most horrible thing that Trump has done, he's conflated two words, refugee and terrorist.
Because if there's one thing Donald Trump can't resist, it's an aging Hollywood actor coming for his neck, especially one who's been too busy meditating on world peace to trade insults, until now. By the time social media got hold of the clip, the whole internet was in flames. Half the comments were hailing Gere as the new patron saint of Hollywood clapbacks, while the other half were already drafting 700-word essays on how a guy who once starred in Runaway Bride has no business coming for Trump's legacy. It was chaotic, hilarious, and completely out of left field, exactly the kind of mess the internet lives for. Everything was going according to plan, until it wasn't. The Lifetime Achievement Award was supposed to be Richard Gere's victory lap, a night of warm nostalgia, gentle piano music, and a highlight reel of smoldering glances from Pretty Woman spliced between shots of him cradling endangered animals in faraway countries. The room was ready for it. Hollywood loves nothing more than honoring one of its own with a perfectly packaged legacy moment. A humble speech about art, compassion, and how the power of cinema can change the world.
The administration is pulling back from all of those human responsibilities, and it seems all he cares about is money.
But Gere must have woken up that morning and chosen chaos. He took the podium, looking every bit the silver-haired Zen master in his crisp tuxedo, and started exactly how everyone expected. Soft-spoken, poetic, thanking his colleagues, family, and naturally, the Dalai Lama. For about 90 seconds, the whole thing felt like one long, warm meditation session. People were already mentally drafting their "what a class act" tweets. Then, out of nowhere, the pivot. Without breaking his calm, measured tone, Gere casually dropped the two words that would hijack the entire evening: bully and thug. At first, the room didn't even register what had happened. The words were so unexpected, so wildly off-brand, that half the audience probably thought they'd misheard him. A few polite claps carried on, like muscle memory. But then, a ripple passed through the crowd, the unmistakable sound of rich people realizing, oh shht, did Richard Gere just start beef?
It was much worse than what he even said. The profundity, the dark profundity of what he's been doing in the last week is mind-boggling. This is dark time in the U.S., and I think it's a time for everyone to stand up.
The room was a mix of polite gasps, nervous wine sipping, and that awkward, are we clapping for this? energy that only happens when someone unexpectedly goes rogue at a black tie event. And Gere, completely unbothered. He delivered the line like he was reading off a grocery list, then went right back to talking about global compassion as if he hadn't just turned the entire evening into a meme waiting to happen. It was the kind of subtle savagery that only someone who spent decades meditating in remote monasteries could pull off. Like he was spiritually above the drama, but also absolutely here for the mess. By the time the standing ovation broke out, mostly from the front rows packed with Hollywood liberals who would cheer for someone calling a paperclip a fascist if the vibes were right, the internet was already working overtime. Clips were being uploaded, hot takes were flying, and somewhere out there, a 22-year-old graphic designer was already photoshopping Gere's face onto a Mortal Kombat fighter with the caption, "Finish him." Meanwhile, the rest of the audience was still processing what they had just witnessed.
Part of a universe of overlapping pain and sadness and joy and expectations and dreams and hopes and visions. And I see this world that we're in now forgetting that. And this kind of very foolish tribalism is starting to take us over, where we think we're all separate from each other. And we have unfortunately elected officials that don't inspire us in the way we want to be inspired.
This was Richard Gere, the human embodiment of a Himalayan salt lamp, casually lighting up a former president like he was hosting an open mic night at a Venice Beach poetry bar. Nobody saw it coming, which made it all the more glorious. If you knew anything about Richard Gere beyond his smoldering gaze and perfectly windswept hair, you'd know this moment wasn't some random Hollywood grandstanding. It was decades in the making. Gere may give off the energy of a man who spends his mornings chanting in front of a sunrise and politely apologizing to houseplants if he waters them too much, but underneath all that zen is a guy who's been quietly picking fights with powerful institutions for years. The difference? He usually does it in a soft, whispery tone that makes you feel bad for disagreeing with him. Long before celebrity activism became a curated Instagram aesthetic, Gere was out here getting himself blacklisted from the Oscars for calling out China's human rights abuses in the middle of presenting an award.
She used to be someone that we had empathy for, used to be someone we cared about, someone we wanted to help, that we wanted to give refuge to, a refugee. We wanted to help. Now we're afraid of them. And this is something that's the biggest crime in itself, conflating these two ideas.
That was back in 1993, when most actors were still using their acceptance speeches to thank their agents and maybe squeeze in a Save the Whales shout-out. Gere took one look at the biggest night in Hollywood, decided, yeah, I think I'll hijack this for Tibetan independence, and never looked back. The man's been risking his career for what he believes in longer than some Twitter activists have been alive. And if you think he's just out here picking fights with distant governments, think again. Gere once went head-to-head with the Catholic Church over AIDS awareness, calling them out for their stance on contraception like a guy who genuinely couldn't understand why anyone would prioritize dogma over saving lives. The fact that he still somehow managed to float through life with the reputation of Hollywood's nicest man is proof that you can absolutely get away with being a savage, as long as you deliver your burns in the voice of a sleep app narrator. But if there's one figure in modern history who embodies everything Richard Gere hates, it's Donald Trump. The chest-thumping, ego-driven, power-hungry bully archetype is basically the final boss in Gere's lifelong quest for universal compassion.
I do have a problem with him. His impulses are diametrically opposed to what we have evolved as human beings and as a country. But he's not unique, and we see this around the world, that these movements to withdraw, to retreat, to challenge the basic laws of nature, the laws of physics, that we are all in this together.
Trump's policies on immigration, climate change, and minority rights weren't just things Gere disagreed with. They were the exact kind of fear-based, power-hoarding nonsense that he's been quietly railing against for decades. For years, Gere has been out here preaching about kindness and empathy, like he's the human embodiment of a deep tissue massage. Meanwhile, Trump built an entire political brand on the idea that kindness is for suckers. These two were never going to exist in the same universe without some kind of cosmic collision. It was just a matter of whether Gere would ever break his monk-like silence and say what he was probably muttering into his ginger tea for the past 8 years. So when Gere stood on that stage and called Trump a bully and a thug, it wasn't just some spicy award show soundbite, it was the soft-spoken culmination of a lifetime spent fighting for the little guy. And if Trump thought he could brush this one off like any other Hollywood jab, he clearly underestimated the power of a man who can torch your entire persona without ever raising his voice above a soothing bedtime story. Within minutes, the internet did what it does best: turn a random celebrity feud into a full-blown digital circus. Twitter was already on fire before Gere even finished his speech.
Around really destroying our country. They're destroying our country at the border. They will allow, in my opinion, because you don't hear the real numbers, 15 million people into our country by the time Biden gets out, which hopefully will be very soon. If they get another term, this country is finished. By the time he gets out, and the people are coming from prisons all over the world, they're coming from mental institutions all over the world, and they're terrorists, and this country is going to be suffering a very big price.
Headlines poured in at lightning speed. Richard Gere calls Trump a thug, and Twitter has thoughts, or the slightly more dramatic, Hollywood Buddha declares war on MAGA King. Half the internet was hailing Gere as a soft-spoken savage, the kind of guy who could deliver a death blow with nothing but a furrowed brow and a well-placed metaphor. Meanwhile, Trump's fan base was already dusting off the old playbook, calling Gere a washed-up has-been who hadn't been relevant since Julia Roberts climbed into that red dress. And the memes? Pure internet gold. Another classic had Gere photoshopped onto the Dalai Lama's body with the words, "Inner peace? Nah, inner clapbacks." Of course, somewhere in the chaos, there was that one rogue conspiracy theory thread claiming Gere was part of a secret Hollywood Illuminati plot to awaken the masses. Because it's not the internet unless someone's accusing a 75-year-old man who rescues stray dogs of trying to overthrow the government. It was only a matter of time before Trump fired back. Because if there's one thing more predictable than gravity, it's Donald Trump wading into a celebrity feud like it's a national emergency.
How weak and pathetic is a guy like that?
Mama La Kama, just don't.
By the time late-night hosts got their hands on the feud, it was comedy open season. Stephen Colbert called it the spiritual showdown no one asked for, but everyone needs. Jimmy Kimmel dubbed Gere the Dalai Lama of drama. Even SNL was rumored to be dusting off their old Baldwin wig, because in 2025, celebrity feuds are officially America's favorite sport. In a world where deepfakes run wild and AI influencers have fan clubs, Richard Gere versus Donald Trump might be the most 2025 thing ever. A completely random, utterly unnecessary feud that somehow feels perfect. It's the kind of plot twist that feels like the universe just threw a dart at a board of celebrity names and said, yeah, let's see what happens if these two start beef. By now, public celebrity spats have become the guilty pleasure reality TV show nobody wants to admit they binge. Messier than the news, funnier than most sitcoms, and always available in bite-sized, meme-ready episodes. Gere versus Trump is just the latest season in Hollywood's never-ending soap opera, except this time the casting is straight out of a fever dream. But underneath the viral chaos, there's something weirdly symbolic about this whole mess.
Look, the situation in America is so confusing and complex and disheartening. On the one hand, of course, this is the President of the United States, and we want him to succeed. We want him to be a good president. Unfortunately, he doesn't display any of the qualities of a good president. This is a very humiliating time, I think, for all of us in America.
He's probably already drafting another social media rant in between golf swings, something like, Richard Gere? Nobody saw Runaway Bride. Nobody cares. Sad. The internet, meanwhile, is low-key begging for round two. A few more viral moments to distract everyone from the fact that the world is a burning mess. Late-night shows are on standby, meme artists have Photoshop tabs open, Somewhere, a TikToker is already working on a Gere versus Trump celebrity deathmatch animation. If this really is the strangest celebrity feud of 2025, let's all just agree to lean in and enjoy the ride. The world might be falling apart, but at least we've got two rich guys bickering to keep us entertained.